Here is a date the Republican Party cannot argue with. The 20th of January, 2029. On that morning, Donald Trump leaves the White House. The 22nd Amendment sends him home. He has said he will not fight it in court. And on that morning, a political party finds out what it actually is. For 10 years, the Republican Party has answered one question with one name. Who leads us? Trump. What do we believe? What Trump believes. How do we win? Trump wins, and everyone rides along. That answer now has an expiry date. Most coverage of this asks a simple question. Who comes next? We think that question is too small. The harder one runs underneath it. What survives when the organizing principle walks out the door? Today, we take that seriously. 4 fault lines, 1 party, and consequences that reach Brussels, Berlin, and Prague. This is the Veritas Brief from Veritas Europaea. We publish slow journalism on European political economy, finance, and geopolitics. Our readers fund us entirely. We carry no advertising and no sponsored content. That arrangement shapes what you are about to hear. Nobody pays us to reach a conclusion. We follow the evidence and we show our sources. A note before we begin. This episode describes an argument inside American politics. We take no side in it. Our interest is analytical. We want to know which changes are structural and which depend on one man. Let us start with timing, because the timing is closer than most people assume. The succession fight does not begin in 2028. It begins in 11 weeks. Americans vote on the 3rd of November in the midterm elections. Trump's name appears nowhere on the ballot. That absence is the whole experiment. Trump's central political achievement was never persuasion. It was mobilization. He pulls infrequent voters off the sidelines. Those voters do not reliably come back for a congressional candidate. We have seen this run before. In 2018, House Republican candidates lost roughly 11.9 million votes compared with 2016. That is a fall of about 19%. Democratic House candidates lost fewer than 845,000 over the same period. Read those two numbers together. One coalition stayed home. The other did not. There is a simpler problem sitting underneath the turnout question. Trump's job approval stood above 50% when he took office. It now sits around 40%. Disapproval has climbed 13 points, from 44% to 57%. Brookings notes that congressional Republicans have done little to separate themselves from the president. In a midterm, that linkage only cuts one way. Republican operatives understand this problem better than their critics assume. They have spent nearly 2 years building a fix. The Republican National Committee has hired state directors across the country. It recruits poll watchers in 17 states. Much of that money chases one specific voter, someone who backed Trump in 2024 and then skipped every midterm of their adult life. The party ran a live test in December in Tennessee's 7th District. One senior Republican strategist told NBC News it was, quote, a test run. Mailers carried the election date itself. Trump recorded a telephone town hall aimed at low-propensity households. The Republican candidate won with about 54%. Here the analysts split, and the split matters. The Republican pollster Patrick Ruffini argues the coalition remains intact, but unmotivated. He wants what he calls a, quote, scorched earth campaign that Trump enjoys and knows how to run. The data analyst G. Elliott Morris reads it differently. He points to Virginia in 2025. The Democratic share of the two-party vote rose from 53% to 57%. That looks like persuasion, not just attendance. The distinction is not academic. If Republicans lost voters, the coalition needs rebuilding. If Republicans lost attendance, it needs reminding. Those are very different repair jobs. Now to the first fault line. This one is structural, and political scientists have measured it. The technical word is personalisation. The findings are unusually blunt for academic work. Robert Harmel and colleagues, writing in Social Science Quarterly, concluded that Trumpism, quote, invaded all aspects of the Republican Party. They describe deinstitutionalization across 3 levels: the party organization, the elected office holders, the voters themselves. The scholar Peter Levine puts the classification plainly. He describes Trump as, quote, a personalist or patrimonialist leader. That category is not an insult. It is a comparative type, and it spans left, right, and technocratic politics worldwide. Sidney Tarrow offers a companion frame. He calls it movement-partyism. An outside movement captures an established party rather than replacing it. Tarrow notes this is historically unusual. Movements normally become parties. This one moved in and took over the furniture. Personalist parties work in a particular way. Authority concentrates in one figure, routine procedures wither, loyalty replaces process as the promotion mechanism. This buys real short-term efficiency. Decisions travel fast when one person makes them. It also creates long-term fragility. The successor inherits the office. He does not inherit the charisma. Comparative politics is fairly consistent here. Personalist vehicles transfer authority badly. The Trump family has floated the obvious workaround. Donald Trump Jr. polls in the low teens. We read that number as name recognition rather than a movement. One mechanism shows the personalization better than any theory. Trump's endorsement now works as the party's allocation system. NPR analyzed more than 1,000 Trump endorsements across a decade. The pattern has shifted sharply. In 2018, the average primary endorsement arrived about 7 weeks before the vote. This cycle, it arrives closer to 7 months out. Nearly 3/4 of announcements went to incumbents. Read that as a portfolio decision. Trump moved earlier and safer. He is protecting the asset. A kingmaker who backs losers stops being a kingmaker. The machine is showing stress, and the past 2 weeks gave us examples. On the 11th of August, Minnesota Republicans chose the State House Speaker, Lisa DeMuth, for governor. Primary voters picked perceived electability over maximum Trump alignment. In South Carolina's special Senate primary, Trump's endorsed candidate advanced to a runoff. She did not win outright. Earlier in the cycle, he forced harder confrontations. He backed Ken Paxton against Senator John Cornyn in Texas over the objections of party leaders. He campaigned against Representative Thomas Massie, who lost. Senator Bill Cassidy lost his Louisiana primary after Trump elevated rivals. Some Republicans privately resent the pattern. Very few say so on the record. Second fault line. This one lives in the data, and it complicates a story the party tells about itself. Republicans spent 2024 celebrating a multiracial working-class realignment. Part of that story holds up well. The Pew-validated voter study found something genuinely striking. Americans who did not vote in 2024 preferred Trump by 44 to 40%. That reverses roughly 6 decades of Democratic advantage among non-voters. Exit polling showed the class divide just as clearly. White voters without degrees favored Trump 66 to 32. White graduates favored Harris 53 to 45. So the realignment was real. Whether it lasts is a separate question entirely. Jared Abbott and Joan C. Williams surveyed 1,940 Trump voters from 2024. Roughly 1 in 5 said they do not currently plan to vote Republican in 2028. The researchers call them waverers. Here's the part that should trouble Republican strategists. The waverers cluster at the bottom of the income ladder. Trump voters earning under $15,000 waver at 31.3%. Those earning above $200,000 waver at 12.7%. Education tracks the same direction. Sit with that inversion for a moment. Trump's most reliable supporters are now his wealthiest and most credentialed. His softest support sits among the working-class voters who supposedly defined the realignment. Among working-class Black Trump voters, 44.8% report wavering. Among working-class Latino Trump voters, 27.8%. Those are precisely the groups that made 2024 look permanent. This matters beyond one election cycle. The working-class realignment justified an entire ideological turn. Republicans abandoned free trade orthodoxy and embraced tariffs partly on this basis. If the voters who supposedly demanded that turn now drift away, the foundation weakens. The party would hold an economic program without its constituency. That is an unstable position for any coalition. There is a second erosion, and it moved faster than anything else in the data. Trump began 2025 at roughly +5 net approval among voters aged 18 to 29. By November, that had collapsed to -44. A modest spring recovery followed, then another slide. The Economist and YouGov recorded a new series low in late June. Ben Leff of VeriCite explained the mechanism to Newsweek. Quote, "It comes back to what Trump promised these groups." Leff identified two specific expectations. Young Americans wanted lower prices. They also wanted no new wars. Both promises now look strained. Rachel Janfaza researches youth political behavior. She frames 2024 as, quote, "a culture shift with Trump 2.0. Not an ideological conversion, a mood. And moods reverse considerably faster than ideologies. About 47% of eligible 18 to 29-year-olds voted in 2024. That approaches historic highs for the age group. Republicans built real margins there. Holding them without Trump on the ballot is a formidable problem. We are going to pause here, and we want to be straight with you about what this is. This is not an advertisement. We do not sell them. Veritas Europaea carries no advertising and no sponsored content. No company pays us to say anything. Our readers fund the whole operation. That funding model is why this episode took 2 weeks rather than 2 hours. We read the polling crosstabs. We chased the academic sources. We linked every claim. Slow journalism is expensive, and the economics only work one way. So we ask directly, if this analysis is useful to you, become a member. Membership does not unlock anything. Every article stays free, and every episode stays free. We are not selling you a key to a door. You are paying for the work to exist, and for the next person to read it without paying. That is patronage, not access. We think the distinction matters. You can join at veritaseuropaea.eu/membership. The link sits in the episode notes. And if membership is not right for you, the free newsletter helps us too. So does telling one person about this episode. Thank you. Back to the Republican Party. Third fault line, and this is the one that broke into the open. The Iran war exposed the deepest ideological rupture in the coalition. Trump campaigned as a peace candidate. He then went to war. Two conservative camps had spent 2 years competing to claim his mandate. The restrainers distrust interventionism and question American commitments abroad. The hawks treat Israel as an indispensable ally and favor confronting its adversaries. Each camp openly disdains the other. There is no polite version of this argument. George Hawley, associate professor of political science at Alabama, described the effect bluntly. Quote, "The attack on Iran has really soured much of the far right on Trump. Tucker Carlson broke with Trump publicly. Marjorie Taylor Greene did the same. Trump dismissed the dissenters as opportunists who never really belonged to the movement. Joe Kent resigned as director of the National Counterterrorism Center in protest. His resignation letter named Israeli influence explicitly. The journalist Michael Weiss labels the breakaway faction the, quote, conspiratorial wing of MAGA. Others contest that description vigorously. The conservative writer Chris Caldwell went further on the substance. He called the strike, quote, so wildly inconsistent with the wishes of his own base. Now the Hawks have a rebuttal, and it is a good one. Self-identified MAGA Republicans largely backed the war. Roughly 77% of Republican-leaning Americans supported it. That number lets them argue the base never wavered. We think the framing misleads, and the reason is precise. The strategist Sarah Longwell had warned about this earlier. She predicted an, quote, unforgivable sin for part of Trump's coalition. The relevant group was never the MAGA core. Those voters follow Trump anywhere, by definition. The exposed group is the broader alliance, people who backed Trump specifically to avoid foreign wars. They are not MAGA identifiers. They are not in that 77%, and they are now sitting loose. Fourth fault line. The contest everyone else covers, which we have deliberately saved for last. J.D. Vance leads every serious poll. His numbers run from roughly 29 to 47% across mid-2026 surveys. CNN's Harry Enton described him as, quote, pulling off something historic in early state polling. Trump has edged towards a blessing. Asked whether Vance was the heir apparent, he replied, quote, well, I think most likely. But Marco Rubio has closed hard, and the New Hampshire numbers tell that story cleanly. In February, Vance led Rubio there 53-7. By late July, the margin had narrowed to 36 against 26. That is a 46-point lead reduced to 10 in 5 months. National polling moves the same direction, more slowly. One Emerson College survey in May put the two men within a single point, 36 to 35. Most other pollsters still give Vance a double-digit lead. Mike Noble, who runs Noble Predictive Insights, now tests a narrower field. He describes it as, quote, candidates who seem more plausible as active contenders at this stage. Here is what the polls do not capture. Vance built his profile as the restrainer's champion. He then defended an administration that bombed Iran. On Megyn Kelly's program, he dismissed hawkish critics as wanting, quote, an endless conflict. Axios framed his risk precisely. Vance may inherit both halves of the rupture, rather than either constituency intact. Rubio faces the mirror image. His hawkishness reassures moderates and independents. It alienates the online populist right that decides primaries. Neither man holds the coalition Trump held. That is the structural finding, and no campaign fixes it. So what actually lasts? Quite a lot, and this is where European readers should pay attention. Tariffs have outgrown their author. Republicans spent the late 20th century championing free trade. The party now supports near-universal tariffs. Roughly 68% of Republicans and leaners approve. No serious contender proposes reversal. Restrictive immigration policy sits in the same category. So does an expansive theory of executive power, which every faction now finds useful. The identity survives too. YouGov polling in March found 60% of Republicans describe themselves as MAGA. Slate predicted a, quote, political Baskin-Robbins for 2028. Many competing flavors of Trumpism. We find that image analytically useful. The label survives, the content fragments. The European stake. Now the part that matters most for our readers. European policymakers often treat Trump as a temporary aberration. We consider that assumption dangerous. The National Security Strategy published in late 2025 deprioritized Europe explicitly. Reports point to troop drawdowns and the transfer of senior Allied commands to Europeans. Analysts now call the emerging structure NATO 3.0. And here is the uncomfortable finding. The succession barely changes this. Vance built his reputation partly on skepticism towards European security commitments. Rubio is a conventional hawk focused on the Middle East and Asia. Neither profile points towards renewed American investment in European defense. The burden-sharing argument predates Trump by decades. Every administration since 2011 has promised an Asian pivot. Mark Carney described the situation in January as, quote, a rupture in the world order. He urged middle powers to act together. Estimates suggest Europe needs roughly 3.5% of GDP to deter Russia without substantial American forces. Capacity takes years to build, even when the money arrives. The 2028 American election will not rescue anyone who waits for it. 3 conclusions, and none of them requires naming a nominee. 1. The policy revolution outlasts the man. Tariffs, immigration restriction, and executive assertiveness now command real consensus across factions. 2. The electoral coalition does not automatically outlast him. It rests on low-propensity voters who answer to a personality, and it is softening at the bottom. 3. The foreign policy question stays unresolved. We expect the 2028 platform to paper over it because ambiguity costs fewer votes than clarity. And one closing thought. Trump solved a problem Republicans had failed to solve for decades. He reached voters the party could not reach by conventional means. He did it by making politics personal, rather than programmatic. That method produced the victory. It now produces the vulnerability. Whoever inherits the Republican Party in 2029 inherits that unsolved problem first. That was the Veritas brief, from Veritas Europaea. The full written analysis runs to nearly 3,000 words, with 5 charts and 22 linked sources. You will find it at veritaseuropaea.eu. Jan Bostel writes and presents the Veritas Brief. We are funded entirely by readers. No advertising, no sponsors. If you want this work to continue, the membership link sits in the show notes. We correct our errors openly. Write to corrections@veritaseuropaea.eu. Until next time.